the wall of tube-like structures in your body, in the wall of hollow organs like urinary bladder, uterus, stomach, in the wall of those organs. And so you said intestine, a tube-like structure. Anything else? You have tube-like structures in your body? Esophagus, very good. Trachea, very good. So in the wall of trachea. How about blood vessels? Arteries, veins, right? So those walls are formed by smooth muscle. Okay. Then epithelial tissue. The main location is in the body surfaces. Your skin has epithelial tissue because skin is the body surface. Number one, so body surfaces. Number two, inner lining of tube-like structures of the body. You already know the tube-like structures of your body, right? Trachea, esophagus, intestine, that you have mentioned, blood vessels, arteries and veins. If you see the tube-like structure, the wall is formed by smooth muscle, but, so this is the wall, smooth muscle, but inner lining, thin layer is formed by epithelial tissue. So inner lining of the tube-like structures is formed by epithelial tissue. Also, the inner lining of the hollow organs is formed by epithelial tissue. Okay? Epithelial tissue is also present in the glands. So another location in the glands. So I have mentioned 3 or 4. Remember those. Number 1, body surfaces. Number 2, inner lining of tube-like and hollow organs. And number 3, in the glands. Okay. Okay. Connective tissue. Connective tissue is the most widely distributed tissue type in the body. That means what? You will find connective tissue almost everywhere in the body. Very widely distributed, very commonly found tissue is the connective tissue. The bones are connective tissue. The cartilages are connective tissue. Fats are connective tissue. Blood is a connective tissue. Okay? So all those structures are formed by connective tissue. That's why you say it is widely distributed. Okay, so those are the important locations where you will find 4 different types of tissue. Now, first we will talk about the epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue can be 2 different types: covering and lining epithelia and glandular epithelia. When I mentioned the location of epithelial tissue, I have already mentioned lining, inner lining, right, of the tubes and hollow organs. Those are the lining epithelia. And I have also said that in the glands you will find epithelial tissue. Remember that? I said in the glands. So those are glandular epithelia. So those epithelial tissues are present in the glands. Those are glandular epithelia, and those are present in the lining of the tube-like structures or hollow organs or outer surfaces. Those are covering or lining epithelium. Important characteristics of epithelial tissue. Number 1, the epithelial tissue cells have apical and basal surfaces. So you know epithelial tissue looks like this. I have shown you before. structure on which the epithelial tissues, epithelial cells are attached, that is called basal membrane. Okay, basal membrane. And the end of the cell that is attached to the basal membrane, that end is called basal end. And the free end, upper free end, that is called apical. Apical end. Okay. So the upper free end is the apical, and lower attached end that is attached to the basal membrane, that is called the basal end. Some epithelial cells could have microvilli or cilia. Those are hair-like structures. I have shown you cilia before. So hair-like structures could be present in the apical end. That is another property. And the difference between microvilli and cilia is microvilli or villi, whatever you say, they are kind of hard, hair-like structures, but hard. So they won't move like this. They will stay like this. Okay. Cilia are very soft, hair-like structures. They can beat like this. They can move like this. Okay. So that's the difference between microvilli and cilia. Are composed of closely packed cells. In case of epithelial tissue, you will see that the cells are attached to each other very closely by intercellular junctions. That's I have shown you before. So that's why we draw like this. We don't draw, when we draw the epithelial tissue, we don't draw like this. We don't do that. Because why we draw like this? Because they are always attached to each other, side by side. Okay? So that is another important property of the epithelial tissue cells. Cells are attached to each other closely. Avascular. Epithelial tissue doesn't have blood vessels in it. No blood vessels are present. Now the question is then how the epithelial tissue gets nutrition and oxygen. Under the epithelial tissue, that basal membrane is a connective tissue. So underlying tissue has blood vessels. And from there, the nutrition and oxygen diffuses into the epithelial tissue. So epithelial tissue gets nutrition and oxygen by diffusion from the underlying connective tissue. Connective tissue has blood vessels, so they get the nutrition and oxygen from underlying tissue. Okay, high rate of regeneration, another very important property of the epithelial tissue. You know that skin surface is epithelial tissue, and we lose the skin all the time. So new skin is formed very quickly, right? You have seen that. So epithelial tissue has high rate of regeneration, reproduce. It can be reproduced very quickly. Inside your nose, the lining is epithelial tissue. Inside your intestine, the lining is epithelial tissue. All those epithelial tissues are being destroyed very often. When you eat something hard or dry, epithelial tissues are lining is being destroyed. In your intestine, in your mouth, in your esophagus, inside your nose, new epithelial tissue is being produced very quickly to replace the dead tissue. That's why we say high rate of regeneration. Now, how do we classify the epithelial tissue? based on the shape of the cells and the number of layers that I have mentioned in last lab, right? So there are different types of cells. Flat cells are squamous, and tall cells are columnar, like columns, and cuboidal cells are cubical shaped cells. Those cells have same height and width, almost same height and width. Those are cuboidal. So tall cells are columnar, flat cells are squamous, and cubical cells, those have equal height and width, those are cuboidal. Okay. And there is another type of epithelial cells I mentioned before. They can change their shape. What are those? Transitional. Okay. Transitional. So their shape is not fixed. That is one way we classify. Another thing is we also see the number of layers formed by those cells. If you see that the cells have formed one single layer, that is the simple, and if you see more than one layer, that is what? Stratified. Okay? Simple indicates single layer, stratified indicates multiple layer. Okay? So we can say simple columnar, simple cuboidal, simple squamous, stratified columnar, stratified squamous, stratified cuboidal. And those cells have cilia attached to the apical end. Those are called ciliated. They have cilia, right? Ciliated. And remember that pseudo-stratified columnar cells are ciliated. So pseudo-stratified columnar type of epithelial tissue has cilia. So if you see cilia attached, that's the pseudo-stratified columnar. Okay? Okay, in next few slides, what I will do, I'll go over the pictures and I'll mention few locations where you will find that epithelial tissue. You just underline or highlight those structures I mentioned. There are more than one structures you will find the epithelial tissue, each type. But those structures or areas I will mention, those are important. Okay, so just try to remember those. Okay, so this is simple squamous. You have seen this under the microscope in last class, last lab. Simple squamous. Where you will find the simple squamous? You will find the simple squamous in the alveoli of the lung. Lung has many air balls, tiny air balls. Those are called alveoli, tiny air balls. In inner surface of those balls, you have simple squamous epithelium. Okay, so in the alveoli, number one. Number two, in the inner surface of the blood vessels. Write it down. Inner surface of the blood vessels. Inner lining of the heart. Innermost lining of the heart is formed by simple squamous. So remember those three areas. In the alveoli of the lung, in the inner layer of the blood vessels, and the heart. Okay. Now you may ask me why simple squamous looks like this, because we know that simple squamous should be like this. Simple squamous should be like this. Why it looks like that? When we say that columnar looks like this, squamous looks like this, we are looking from the side. like you are looking at me from the side, okay? But if you look me from the top, would I look like this? I look totally different, right? You will only see my head and shoulder parts. Make sense? If you look from the top. So the view will be completely different. You won't be able to tell my height, right? So in this case, you are looking from the top. That's why you see the cells. This is one cell, this is another cell, this is another cell. Okay? You are looking from the top, not from the side. So that's why it is important to know in histology technicians, they need to know that in which plane you have dissected the structure. You know different planes, right? Frontal plane, sagittal plane, transverse or horizontal plane, right? So if you cut my body in horizontal plane and take a slice, it will look like this, round, right? If you cut like this, then you will be able to see the line. So when you cut the tissue, which way you are cutting, that will give you the picture. Okay. Simple cuboidal, a single layer of cuboidal cells. If you look carefully, the wall of these tube-like structures. See, this is a cuboidal cell. In many cases, it will be very difficult to see the cell membranes. So remember, you have to be very careful when you see the tissue under the microscope. So you will see the wall of these tube-like structures and try to find at least one cell which has clear boundary. So in this case, I will say this one has a clear boundary. You can see that, right? So this is not tall, not very flat. This is a cuboidal cell. So we can say now that this is simple cuboidal, single layer of cuboidal cells. Okay. So you need some practice and understanding when you see the tissue under the microscope. Where you will find? You will find simple cuboidal in kidney tubules, tube-like structures inside the kidney, and ducts of the glands. So two locations I have mentioned, you need to remember, kidney tubules and ducts. Ducts are also tube-like structures inside the glands. Okay? So inside the glands, you have many tube-like structures. So in the wall of those tubes, you will find the simple cuboidal. Okay? In the glands, in the duct of glands and kidney tubules. Okay? So remember those two. Simple columnar. You see a single layer of tall cells. Simple columnar. And where you will find simple columnar? In the stomach, small intestine, large intestine. So just remember that from stomach to all the way down to the anus, the inner lining is formed by simple columnar. Starting from where? Stomach. Then next, after the stomach is small intestine, right? Then large intestine. So inner lining of those organs or structures, you have simple columnar. But above the stomach, you have what? What is this? Esophagus, right? That is not lined by simple columnar. That's why you say stomach and below. Okay? Stomach and below. Pseudostratified ciliated. You see, pseudostratified columnar must have cilia. So you see the presence of cilia, hair-like structures here. And pseudostratified ciliated are present in the upper respiratory tract, upper respiratory organs. That means what? Inside your nose, that means in the nasal cavity, inside your trachea and bronchus, upper part of the respiratory system. in the nose, in the trachea, in the bronchus. Okay. So in the test, if I ask you inside the trachea what type of epithelial lining you will find, that's the pseudostratified columnar, because they have cilia. And remember that cilia is present in the upper respiratory organs. Why? Because you know that mucus, that slippery secretion occurs, right? And mucus does what? Mucus trap the dark particles, dust or dark particles, right? When you inhale, dark particles will be attached to the mucus, to the surface. Now, what you have to do? Remove the mucus, right, from there, because it's dirty. So, the cilia, millions of cilia, they work together like this and create huge power. Well, although they are very small, but when millions of them work together, right, then that will create huge power. That will move the mucus down from your tract. Okay? So, to move the dirty mucus or slippery secretion down, you need the cilia. Okay? That's why pseudostratified ciliated or pseudostratified columnar cells are present here. Okay, now we'll talk about stratified squamous. Many layers of squamous cells. When you see the stratified squamous, remember one thing, only look the top part, this part, don't look this part. These are, you see, these are not flat cells. These are stem cells. This part, you see, stratified squamous, because many flat cells are here from many layers. Okay? So this is stratified squamous. Many layers of flat cells. Where you will find the stratified squamous? You will find the stratified squamous. First, remember one thing that will make it easier. Those areas of your body gets a lot of friction. Those areas are lined with stratified squamous. So, inside the mouth, right, you get a lot of friction when you eat the food, dry food, hard food, you get a lot of friction. So, inside the mouth, you have stratified squamous. Esophagus, above the stomach, remember. Esophagus is a narrow tube. So, when you swallow the food passes through that narrow tube and causes a lot of friction in the wall of the esophagus because it is narrow. So, lining of esophagus is stratified squamous. Make sense? Okay. Skin. Skin surface is formed by stratified squamous. That makes sense, right? You get a lot of friction on the skin all the time. So, that is also stratified squamous. Inside the vagina, female reproductive, inside the vagina, you have stratified squamous. Okay? Now, you see another thing. Stratified squamous is present in both dry and wet areas. Your skin is dry, but inside the mouth is wet. So, the stratified squamous that is present in the dry area, that is called keratinized. And that stratified squamous is present in wet areas like inside the vagina, inside the mouth, inside the esophagus. Those are non-keratinized, moist areas or wet areas. Wet areas. Okay, so those are non-keratinized. Transitional. Sometimes you may get confused when you see transitional and pseudo-stratified columnar. But remember, the simplest way is in case of pseudo-stratified, you have cilia, right? In transitional, you don't have cilia. Otherwise, they might look very similar. Okay, so that's the easiest way. Transitional is present in the urinary bladder and in the ureter. Ureter is the tube that carries urine from the kidney to the bladder. Okay, so urinary bladder and ureter. Just remember those two. Okay. When the bladder is expanded big, then the cells, transitional cells, get flat because of pressure. When the bladder is empty, gets smaller, those cells get columnar. And that's why we say that transitional cells change their shape because of pressure. They can change the shape. They can take a lot of pressure by changing their shape. Stratified cuboidal and stratified columnar, those epithelial tissues are present in very small amount in our body. Okay, so just ignore those two. You don't need to remember the location of those two. Those are only present in very small amount in our body. Okay, so that's all about the epithelial tissue. You need to know the locations, you need to know how they look like, how we classify them, and important properties, right, of the epithelial tissue. Now we'll talk about the connective tissue. The most widely distributed tissue type is the connective tissue. Present almost everywhere in the body, and connective tissue is present in our body in many different forms. Your bones are connective tissue, very hard, solid structure. Your cartilages are connective tissue, right? So different than bones. Your fats are connective tissue, very soft. Your blood is a connective tissue. Why all those different types of structures all belong to the connective tissue? Because all of them originate or come from a single source. What is that? That is called mesenchyme. Mesenchyme is the source of all different connective tissues, different types. Bones come from mesenchyme, your cartilages come from mesenchyme, your blood comes from mesenchyme, your fats come from mesenchyme. That's why all these are connective tissues. Okay. Connective tissue has varying degrees of vascularity. Some connective tissues have a lot of blood vessels, blood supply. Some connective tissues have less blood supply. That's why we say varying degrees of vascularity. For example, your cartilages have no blood vessels. So no blood vessels in cartilages, one type of connective tissue. Small number of blood vessels are present in the bones. Bones have small amount of blood vessels. But blood itself is a connective tissue. So the amount of vascularity here is the blood. Presence of different types of cells and non-living extracellular ground substances and fibers. So those things are usually present in the connective tissue. So if you see the connective tissue, you will see different types of cells present in connective tissue. These are cells, and in between the cells, we know cells are the living structures or units. In between the cells, you have non-living ground substances. Okay, non-living ground substances in between the cells. And also, you have fibers, connective tissue fibers. You have different types of fibers. These are fibers in the ground substance. Okay. Okay. Now, another important characteristic is widely distributed that I have already mentioned. Now, important functions of connective tissue. From its name, you can tell the most important function of connective tissue: connection. It connects different structures together. That's why it is called connective tissue. Best example is cartilages. You see here, these are cartilages, and these cartilages are connecting the ribs to the sternum, these bones to this bone. So you see a nice example of connection provided by the connective tissue. Make sense? You have ligaments. Ligaments are connective tissue. Tendons are connective tissue. You know that ligaments connect bone to bone. Tendons connect muscle to bone. So those are the examples of connection provided by the connective tissue. Okay? Protection. Bone is a connective tissue, and we know that bones protect our important organs. Bones protect the brain. Bones protect the eyeball, structures inside the mouth, your heart, lungs, those are protected by the bones. The pelvic organs here are protected by the bones. Okay? So if someone wants to stab you, okay, your ribs will try to stop, protect that. If someone hits on your head, your cranial bones will protect your brain. Okay, so that's the protection. Support. Of course, the whole skeleton is formed by connective tissue, bones and cartilages, you see, forming the skeleton. So skeleton supports the whole body. That's the best example of support given by the connective tissue. Inside your cranial cavity, you have brain. So brain is being supported by the cranial bones. Okay, your eyeballs are being supported by the bones. Flexibility. Some connective tissues provide flexibility. What is that? Ability to change the shape. That's the flexibility. So you know that ear is the most flexible organ, right, in your body structure, that you can twist, you can bend, you can pull, you can change the shape easily, right, of your ear. So this is a good example that flexibility is provided by the connective tissue, because ear has elastic cartilage. Cartilage is a connective tissue. It has a lot of elasticity, so it can change the shape. Transport. Blood is a connective tissue, I have mentioned already. And since blood is a connective tissue, transportation is an important function of connective tissue, because we know that blood transports all important chemicals, nutrients, gases, right? Oxygen, carbon dioxide, water, hormones, those are transported by the blood. So transportation is an important function of the connective tissues.
You said that ligaments attach the bone to
bone to bone, one bone to another bone. And tendons connect muscle to the bone. Okay. Okay, so those are important functions and they make sense why those functions are provided by the connective tissue. So connective tissue has different types of cells, ground substances and fibers. Different types of fibers are present in the connective tissue. What are those different types of fibers? Connective tissue has collagen fibers. One type of fiber is called collagen. Another type of fiber is called elastic. Elastic fibers. And the third one, that is the reticular. Okay, so remember those three names, three different types of fibers we see in the connective tissue. But always remember that not all three are present in all connective tissue. Some connective tissues could have one, some could have two, some might not have any fibers. But those are the three types of fibers we see in the connective tissue. Collagen is the most common type, elastic and reticular. Then different types of cells. Many different types of cells are present in connective tissue because we know that connective tissue, many different structures belong to connective tissue. So that's why different types of cells belong to connective tissue. For example, bone cells. In your bone, you have osteoblasts, osteocytes. Osteo indicates bone. Okay, so osteoblasts and osteocytes, those are bone cells. Those are connective tissue because we know that connective tissue cells, we know that bone is a connective tissue. Blood cells, of course, they are connective tissue cells because blood is a connective tissue, right? Fibroblasts, remember that one? Fibroblast is the most common type of connective tissue cell. Most commonly seen connective tissue cell is fibroblast. Okay? They produce fibers. When I showed you different types of cells in early part of my lecture today, I showed you fibroblasts. The first one, upper left one. They produce fibers. Fat cells are connective tissue cells, of course, because fats are connective tissue, right? Cartilage cells are connective tissue. The term chondro indicates cartilage. Okay? Chondro indicates cartilage. So chondrocytes, chondroblasts, those are cartilaginous cells. The difference between blast and cyte, remember, blasts are young and cytes are mature. So blast cells are young cells and cyte cells are old or mature cells. So osteoblasts are young bone cells, osteocytes are old or mature bone cells. Chondrocytes are mature cartilaginous cells and chondroblasts are young cartilaginous cells. Okay, so you will see all those different types of cells in the connective tissue. They have shown a picture where they try to show different types of cells and fibers in the ground substances. I have already shown you here. So you already know that three different types of fibers are present and you know the cells. Now, how to classify the connective tissue? Connective tissue classification is pretty wide, so you will need a lot of space in your paper. I will write it down and copy it. This is very important. If you keep this, it will be easy for you to understand the connective tissue classification. Okay? So, connective tissue. First, we divide the connective tissue into connective tissue proper. Connective tissue proper. And then cartilages. We know that cartilages are connective tissue. Then bones. Bones are connective tissue. And the liquid form of connective tissue is the blood. So blood is the liquid form of connective tissue. All these three are solid form. Blood is liquid. Now connective tissue proper is divided into two groups, two types. Loose connective tissue proper and dense connective tissue proper. So loose type and dense type. Loose, there are three loose type connective tissue proper. What are those? Loose areolar, loose reticular, and loose adipose. Adipose is fat. Okay, so those are three loose connective tissue proper. Loose areolar, loose reticular, and loose adipose. Okay. Then dense. Loose means loose, soft, loose, and dense is heavily packed. So dense connective tissue, there are two different types of dense. Dense regular, and dense irregular. Okay, those two types. Then cartilages. Three types of cartilages are present in our body. Most common type is hyaline. Hyaline cartilage is the most common type. Then others are fibrocartilage and elastic. Elastic in your ear, as I have mentioned earlier, has a lot of elasticity. Okay, so those are three types of cartilages. Then bones. We have two different types of bones. Spongy, that's the soft type, soft bone, and compact. Compact is the hard bone. Okay. Some places spongy is also called cancellous bone. You will see that. So same thing. Okay, spongy or cancellous. Blood is blood. Blood, you would know that it's the liquid type of connective tissue. Okay. So this is the classification of connective tissue. Try to keep this classification in your head. This is very important. Okay. In one picture you can see the whole connective tissue. Okay. Now let me quickly talk about three different types of loose, and when you see the picture it will make sense to you. Okay, so loose areolar. If you see loose areolar, you will see the cells are present here and there, not closely attached. Few cells are here and there, and a lot of ground substances in between the cells. And in the ground substances, you will see two types of fibers. The fibers that take red color or red dye, these fibers are collagen. Okay. So collagen fibers are present in loose areola, and they look what? Red, because they take red color, dye or stain. And another type of fiber you will see in the ground substance too. Those look like thin dark hair-like fibers. Those are called elastic. So you will also find elastic fibers. So this is loose areola cells, ground substance, and two types of fibers. Red colored fibers. The fibers are not actually red, but they take red color. Okay? They are white colored fibers, but they take, when we stain or dye the tissue, they will take red color. And the dark colored thin hair-like fibers, those are elastic fibers. So if you see these things, this is loose areola. Reticular. In reticular type of loose connective tissue proper, you will see reticular fibers. So not elastic or collagen, you will see reticular presence of reticular fiber. We know that there are three types of fibers present in connective tissue. So reticular fibers are present in reticular type of loose connective tissue, and collagen and elastic are present in areola. Then adipose. If you see the adipose tissue, it's very easy to identify adipose tissue because many cells are attached to each other like this, and no ground substance, no fibers, and these cells look like white eggs. Don't say white egg if I ask you, these are the cells. They look like what? White eggs. Okay? And inside the adipose or fat cells, you have a lot of empty spaces. That's why the nucleus cannot stay in the center, because center part is kind of empty. So nucleus get attached to the membrane, goes to the side, because there is nothing to hold the nucleus in the center. So they will go to the side and will get attached to the cell membrane. So you see the nucleus like this. So that's the adipose type of loose connective tissue proper. So very easy to identify. Then, so we are done with loose type of connective tissue proper. When you see, it will make sense to you. Easy to identify. Now we will see dense. Dense means what? Dense means closely packed, right? Dense. And in dense type of connective tissue proper, you will see the fibers are heavily packed together like this. They are heavily present together. Now, what type of fibers are these? By looking the color, can you tell me what type of fibers? See the color. Collagen. Okay? So collagen fibers. Many collagen fibers are packed together, dense. And if you see that the fibers, all collagen fibers, are running in same direction. Like we can say, these fibers are running in same direction. That is the regular. So all collagen fibers are in same direction. Now, if you see that the collagen fibers, some fibers are running in one direction, other fibers are going in a different direction, then what is this? Irregular. Because the fibers are not in regular direction, not in one direction, they are going in different directions. That's why it is called irregular. Okay? So dense regular and dense irregular. Both are formed by heavily packed collagen fibers, but in case of dense regular, the fibers are running in same directions, and in case of irregular, the fibers are going in different directions. Okay? Okay. So now we'll go over the pictures of different types of connective tissues, and we'll see how they look like, and I'll mention again few important locations where you will find those type of connective tissues. You need to remember those, not everything, those I will mention. Okay, only. So this is the areola, loose areola. You see the cells, and two types of fibers you see here. Red fibers are collagen fibers, and the dark thin hair-like fibers, those are elastic fibers. Okay, so few cells and two types of fibers. If you see, that is loose areola. Where you will find loose areola, you will find them around the blood vessels in your body. So around the blood vessels. So provide actually cushion to the blood vessels, soft tissue around the blood vessels. Okay, and also under the epithelial tissue. You remember when I did draw the epithelial tissue, I said that under the epithelial tissue you have the connective tissue on which the epithelial tissues are attached. So just write it down, under the epithelial tissue. So around the blood vessels and under the epithelial tissue. Loose adipose or fat. You see white eggs are attached to each other. Those are the cells, fat cells, and the nucleus is not in the center, because center is almost empty. Nucleus is attached to the membrane. These are the nucleus. Okay, attached to the membrane. So that's the fat. Where you will find fat, you know, in different locations of our body we have fat. Just know that adipose is the fat. A lot of fat is found in the abdominal wall under the skeletal muscle. Thick pad of fat is present there. But just know that fat is the adipose, and you know the location of the fat. Reticular. Reticular has reticular fibers. So you see, this is the reticular tissue, and these fibers, thick, dark fibers, they look brown to dark. Sometimes they look brown. So these fibers are reticular fibers, and this tissue is the reticular tissue. Okay. So where you will find the reticular type of connective tissue? In the spleen, in the liver, and bone marrow. Spleen, liver, bone marrow, those are the locations you will find the reticular type of connective tissue. Okay, now we are done with connective tissue proper use. Now we will see dense lot of collagen fibers. You see red colored fibers, but they are heavily packed. And in this case, you see all fibers, although wavy, but they are going in same directions. Same direction. That's why this is dense regular. Okay? Where you will find dense regular, you will find in tendons and in ligaments. Let's write it down, those two structures. In tendons and ligaments. Tendons connect muscle to bone and ligaments connect bone to bone usually. Dense irregular. You see the bundle of fibers, but they are going in different direction. Bundle of fibers going in this direction, this bundle of fibers going in this direction, some are going in all other directions. Okay, so this is dense irregular. And where you will find this, you will find in joint capsules, capsules of the joint. Actually, capsule is the covering around the joint. Okay, membranous covering around the joint. So just, and another location important, dermis of the skin, inner part of the skin. That is the dermis that has dense irregular. So in the skin and the dermis of the skin and what? Capsules of the joints. Okay, so we are done with that. Now we'll see cartilages. Three types of cartilages are present. I'll just give you important information about the cartilages. You need to remember those. So first question I can ask you, what are three types of cartilages? Hyaline, elastic and fibro. Which one is the most common type? Hyaline. Hyaline cartilage is the most common type of cartilage. Where you will find the hyaline cartilage in our body? In very early life, in fetus, whole skeleton is formed by hyaline cartilage. No bone is present. No bone is present in fetal skeleton. Whole skeleton is hyaline cartilage. Okay, so that is one location. Number two, costal cartilages. What are the costal cartilages? These cartilages are called costal cartilages in the thoracic case. Connect the ribs to the stomach. Okay? So these are hyaline type cartilages. Okay, costal cartilages. In the respiratory tract, in your trachea, in your larynx, in your bronchus, you will find hyaline cartilage. So respiratory tract, trachea, larynx, bronchus, those are formed by hyaline cartilage. In the joints, also write it down, in the joints, the cartilages, joint cartilages are called articular cartilage. Okay, so joint cartilages are, or articular cartilages are hyaline type cartilage. So I am repeating again, where you will find the hyaline cartilage, you will find in fetal skeleton, number one, right? Skeleton of the fetus. Number two, I said costal cartilages in the thoracic case, right? Number three, I said respiratory tract cartilages. And number four, joint cartilages. Those are called articular cartilages. Okay? Articular cartilages. So I will ask question like, in this structure, what type of cartilage you will find. So you should be able to answer. Then elastic cartilage. Elastic cartilage is present in only couple of structures in our body. I will mention two of them. One is in your ear. You know that ear changes the shape. You can change the shape of the ear very easily. That's the elastic cartilage. Ear. And number two, epiglottis. Epiglottis is in the larynx. Here and epiglottis. Okay, it is in the larynx. So those two structures are formed by elastic cartilage. Fibrocartilage, also present in few structures in our body. I'll just mention two or three. Fibrocartilages are present in symphysis pubis or pubic symphysis, same thing, okay? Symphysis pubis or pubic symphysis is this piece of cartilage here. You see here? This piece of cartilage. When two hip bones join together, two hip bones are attached by symphysis pubis, okay? That is fibrocartilage. Intervertebral discs. You see these discs in between vertebrae. These discs are formed by fibrocartilages. Okay, so intervertebral discs. Have you heard the term meniscus?
Yes.
Meniscus in the joints, right? In knee joint, sometimes we get torn meniscus. So that meniscus is formed by also fibrocartilage. Okay, so those three structures are formed by fibrocartilage. So just remember those areas or structure. Now we'll see the picture of those three types of cartilages. You see here, this is hyaline. Easy to identify. If you know the points, it will be very easy for you to identify, and it is important both for your lecture and lab. So hyaline cartilage has only few cells, few chondrocytes. Chondro means cartilage, cyte means cells. So cartilaginous cells are chondrocytes. So few chondrocytes, and since the cells are very few, lot of ground substances in between the cells, because we have lot of space in between the cells, so filled with ground substance. Few cells, plenty of ground substances, and number three, no visible fibers. Okay, so you won't see any fibers in the ground substance. So if you see that, that's the hyaline cartilage. Another information here is these are the cells, chondrocytes. And the cells sit inside a pouch or cavity. It's like a cave. Inside the cave, you are sitting inside a small cave or cavity. You are sitting there. or chamber, inside a small chamber you are sitting there. So that cavity or chamber or pouch, whatever you say, that is called lacunae. So you see that they said chondrocyte in lacunae. So lacunae is the cavity or chamber in which the chondrocytes reside or located. Okay. So that is true for cartilage and also bones. When you see the bones, the bone cells also sit inside lacunae. So if I ask you, what is a lacunae? Lacunae is a cell out chamber or pouch or cavity in which the cell live or stay. Okay. Elastic cartilage has many cells. So if you see many cells, that is not definitely iron. So this is elastic cell. Elastic cartilage has many cells and elastic fibers. You see, these are the elastic fibers. You already know, I have mentioned that elastic fibers are dark, hair-like fibers. So you see here, elastic fibers are present. So if you see many cells and presence of elastic fibers, that is elastic cartilage. Okay. And these fibers give elasticity, the ability to change the shape. Fibrocartilage, lot of fibers. That's why it is called fibro. Since this cartilage has lot of fibers, this is fibrocartilage. So, what is this? Quickly, hyaline, because few cells, lot of ground substances, right? Because few cells, so lot of ground substances, and no what? Fibers. Very good. No visible fibers. So that's hyaline. Then what is this? Elastic. Because many cells and dark elastic fibers, right? And then what is that? Fibro. Because lot of fibers. Okay. So this picture, you see these are collagen fibers, but they have been stained with blue colors. But most of the cases, I have mentioned that collagen fibers are white colored fibers. How you will dye, it will look like that. So in most of the cases, we use red color to dye the collagen fibers, but here they have dyed with blue. But these are collagen fibers. Anyway, so if you see plenty of fibers, that's the fibrocartilage. Okay? And you know the locations where you will find those three types of cartilage. Bone. So there are two types of bones, spongy and compact. This is a compact bone histology. So bone is very nicely structured. If you see the structure of a bone under the microscope, what you will see? You will see many circles, round structures. Each round structure is called an osteon. Okay, so bone consists of many. If you see the bone under the compact bone under the microscope, you will see many round structures, and each round structure is an osteon. Why we see many round structures under the microscope? Because the actual structure of the bone is this. Many columns bundled together to form the bone. So this is actually the structure of the bone. Okay? Many what? Columns. Now, if you make a cross section, cut like this, what you will see? You will see many round structures, right? Many circles. That's why under the microscope, since we make the cross section, you see many circles. Okay. Now each column is called what? An osteon. This is an osteon. This is another osteon. Okay. So many osteons, they bundle together to form the bone. Okay. So now, if you see the structure of one osteon, what are the things you will see? In the very center of the osteon, you will see a canal. A canal passes through the center of the osteon. That is called central canal. Very simple. Since it is in the center, it is the central canal. Blood vessels and nerves pass through the central canal. So you have an artery here, you have a vein, so veins and arteries, and a nerve. Okay, so you have those structures in the central canal. They pass through the central canal. Okay, then around the central canal you'll see lacunae. Lacunae are what? Yeah. Everybody? You already know lacunae, right? So lacunae form kind of circles around the central canal like this. They form circles. And lacunae contains what? The cell, right? Cell sits inside the lacunae. So bone cells are osteocytes. You know that osteo is bone and cytes are the cells. So inside the lacunae you will see tiny osteocytes, bone cells. And osteocytes look interesting. They look like small spiders. They have many leg-like structures. Okay, so many tiny leg-like structures they have. So now we can say this structure is osteocyte within the lacunae, within the chamber. So osteocyte sitting within the lacunae. Okay. Now, in between the lacunae, these spaces are filled with ground substances, also called matrix. So, matrix or ground substances, and in case of bone, the matrix or ground substance has a name because it is hard. The matrix or ground substance of bone is very hard, extremely hard, and it has a name, that is what? Lamella. Lamella. Okay. So lamella is nothing but the ground substance or matrix of the bone. Okay. So that's the basic structure of a compact bone. Got it? So very nicely structured. Many columns. And many many columns provide strength of the bone. So a lot of strength is given to the bone because of that columnar organization. Blood. Blood is the liquid form of connective tissue. Blood is the liquid form of connective tissue, and that's why it is called a special type of connective tissue because it is liquid. Other connective tissues are in solid form, right? And blood has plasma and different types of cells, red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets. So that's the blood. Okay. Nervous tissue found in the brain, spinal cord, and nerves. In those three locations, you can add nerves. So in those three locations, you will find the nervous tissue. Very delicate and sensitive, extremely sensitive and delicate tissue. Easily can be destroyed or can die easily. If you open the brain, you don't need to do anything. If you just open the skull and let the brain get touched to the air, the brain tissue will start to deteriorate, will die. So very sensitive, highly delicate. Okay? Tissue. Two types of cells are found in the nervous tissue. The supporting cells are called neuroglias. So neuroglias are supporting cells. They support. And main cells are neurons. So if I ask you which cells are the supporting cells, the neuroglial cells. Which cells are the main cells? Those are neurons. Okay. If you see a neuron, you will see a cell body. I have shown you a neuron in the first part of lecture today. So a cell body, that is a nucleus, and a number of processes, extensions. So you see two types of processes. Long process, usually a single one, that is called axon. Axon is the long process, and short processes, those have branches, those are called dendrites. Okay, dendrites. So this is the cell body. So that's the structure of a neuron. It has a cell body, dendrites, and an axon. Axon is the long process. Short branched processes are dendrites, and dendrites are usually many. And axon is usually one in a neuron. Okay, so that's the structure of a typical neuron. What's the function of a neuron? Transmission of electrical signal. You have already written when I told you, showed you different types of cells today. Transmission of electrical signal. And nervous system is the control system of the body. It controls other systems you already know. So the function of neural tissue is controlling the functions. This is the picture of the neural tissue or nervous tissue. You see main cells are these large cells. These are the neurons. So in neurons you see the processes. You see this is the cell body, these are the dendrites, and this one is axon. Although they didn't show the whole thing, it must be very long. Okay? So axon, dendrites, cell body. So this is the neuron. And you see those tiny cells, those are the supporting cells, neuroglial or neuroglias. Okay? Neuroglial cells or neuroglial. Okay, so that's all about the neural tissue or nervous tissue. The last tissue type we'll talk today is the muscle tissue or muscular tissue. There are three types of muscle tissues are present: skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. So skeletal, I have mentioned where you will find the skeletal attached to the bones or skeleton and in the body walls. If you see the skeletal under the microscope, it will look like this. Cylindrical, I am not drawing anything because I did already in last lab. So cylindrical muscle fibers, striations, many lines are present. Those are called striations. So striated multiple nuclei, multinucleated, and nuclei are not in the center but attached to the sides. Okay, so that's the skeletal muscle. This is very easy to identify. Cardiac, again cylindrical shaped muscle fibers, striation present. In addition to that, cardiac muscle has what? Cardiac muscle has intercalated discs, the thick bands or lines. You see those thick lines are intercalated discs are present. Those are not present in skeleton. And another thing is branching. You see side branches are present. You see this is a fiber, this is a fiber, this is the branch. Okay? So you see branches come out from the fiber. Usually single nucleus, but sometimes two nuclei could be present. Okay? In case of skeletal, multiple, many nuclei. Smooth muscle fibers are not cylindrical. They are spindle shaped. Spindle shape means both ends are pointed and middle part is wide, and a nice single nucleus is present in the center of the muscle fiber. Okay, so no striation, no branching, no intercalated disc, only spindle shaped muscle fibers have nice single nucleus inside. Okay, so that's the smooth muscle. And where you will find the smooth muscle in the wall of tube-like structures, I have already mentioned, in the wall of hollow organs in the body, right? So in those locations you find this muscle. Okay. Inflammation. Since this process is related to the tissue, we will just quickly talk about that. What is inflammation? Injury to the tissue. If injury occurs in the tissue, you will see some changes in the injured tissue. What changes you see? Can you name one from this side? When you get an injury, what kind of change you see in the tissue?
Redness.
Redness. Anything else? Swelling, right? Temperature. If swelling is really, inflammation is really big, a lot, then if you touch, you will see that area is little bit, temperature is little bit higher, it's little bit warmer. Okay, so slight increase of temperature that happens, right? So those are, and pain, right? Pain will be bad. So pain, slight increase of temperature, swelling, and redness. Those are the signs of inflammation. Okay. So inflammation is the response of our tissues to injury. That's the best way to define inflammation. Inflammation is the response of our tissues to injury. How the tissue will respond? By showing redness, swelling, pain, and slight increase of temperature. Those are the common signs. Now, last thing, why those things happen? Well, just think that this is the tissue. Tissue consists of cells, right? We know that many cells form tissue, they join together. And we have capillaries, or blood vessels going to the tissue. And when inflammation occurs, some chemicals are released there from the tissue. A number of chemicals, I just mentioned two. One is histamine, another is prostaglandin. There are many different types of prostaglandins, A, B, C. So just know that prostaglandins or PGC So those two chemicals are very important. What they do, histamine causes dilatation of the capillaries. That means capillaries, if this is the opening, capillaries get bigger. Dilation or dilation of the capillaries occur. So when that happens, just if you see the wall of the capillary, this is the wall of the capillary, all capillaries have many tiny holes in the wall. So small amount of fluid can leak out, can get out. Now when the dilatation occurs due to histamine, what happens? The capillary wall get stressed, and these holes, tiny holes, get bigger, okay, due to dilatation. And histamine causes the holes bigger, and now more fluid from the blood will come out. Make sense? If the holes in the wall of the capillary gets bigger, then more fluid and water will leak out, will get out, right? So that will cause what? Swelling. Make sense? Swelling will occur. When the blood vessels or capillaries get dilated, see, this is the normal lumen size. Now histamine will cause dilatation. So more or less blood will flow now. More, right? Because the lumen is now much wider. So more blood will flow at the site of injury. So that area will look red. That will cause the redness, because we know that if more blood flows in certain area, that area will look reddish. Okay? And blood is slightly warmer than body temperature. So when more blood will go there, that area will be a little bit warmer. Okay? So and those will be done by histamine. And prostaglandin, this guy, this chemical will stimulate the nerves in that area and will cause pain. Will cause pain. The pain will occur due to prostaglandin. Okay. So that's the inflammation. Okay. That's the inflammation. Healing of the tissue. After injury, what should happen next? The healing should occur. So during the healing, what happens? These are the fibroblasts, most common type of connective tissue cells. You remember that. Fibroblasts. Fibroblasts do what? They produce fibers. Good. That you remember. So fibroblasts produce fibers. So the fibroblasts will produce fibers, and those fibers will bridge the gap, because the dead tissue is there. So that gap should be filled. So fibroblasts will do that. Okay, bridge the gap. Then we have macrophages in tissues. You know that macrophages are what type of cells? Phagocytic. You remember that? They can eat dead cells, I said, and microorganisms, right? So macrophages, those phagocytic cells will come forward, will eat the dead cells or injured cells and remove them from that area. That is important too. Okay? Also remove the debris and dead cells. New blood vessels will be formed from adjacent blood vessels, from surrounding blood vessels. New blood vessels will be, new branches will be formed. And then finally, the epithelial tissue will be regenerated. Because we know that epithelial tissue can regenerate, epithelial tissue will cover the injured tissue. Okay? So that's how the healing will be done. Okay.